We are told this is the greatest war epic ever written. 10 years of siege, gods and heroes, the fall of a city. It is not. Strip away the bronze and the glory, and the Iliad is something stranger and far more modern. A story about a man sitting in his tent, refusing to work because his feelings were hurt. The single most gifted soldier of his age, the one man who could end the war in an afternoon, folds his arms and quits. Not over a wound, not over a cause, but over a bruised ego and a prize that was taken from him. And because he will not let it go, because he would rather be right than be reconciled, the people he loves most begin to die. This is the oldest story we have about de-escalation and about what happens when nobody in the room is willing to take the first step back. Homer, 3,000 years ago, already understood something we still get wrong: that the most dangerous force on any battlefield, in any marriage, in any office, is not the enemy. It is one proud person who cannot put down a grievance. The Iliad does not celebrate that man's rage. It anatomizes it, coldly, patiently, and shows you the bill, item by item, until you see that the thing he was defending was never worth what it cost. By the end, the great warrior gets no triumph and no revenge that heals him. He gets a grief so total it finally burns the anger out of him. That is the real subject of this poem, not war, but the ruin one ungoverned temper leaves behind. The poem is the Iliad, and we credit it to Homer, though almost everything about him is a question mark. He may have been one blind singer on the Greek islands around the 8th century before Christ. He may have been a whole tradition of bards, memorizing and reshaping these lines by firelight for generations before anyone wrote them down. What survives is an oral epic of astonishing size, set in the 10th and final year of the legendary war between the Greeks and the city of Troy. We are reading it in the clear, plain prose translation Samuel Butler published in 1898, long in the public domain, so the words you hear sit close to the sinew of the Greek without the fog of fake antique poetry. And notice how it opens, not with a battle, not with a hero, but by naming its true subject in the very first line. Butler renders it, "Sing, O goddess, the anger of Achilles, son of Peleus, that brought countless ills upon the Achaeans." Read that again. Not the war, not the fall of Troy. The anger, one man's anger, and the countless ills it brought down on his own people, the Achaeans, which is Homer's word for the Greeks. The poet tells you on the first page exactly what this is about. It is a poem about a mood. One thing to clear up before we start, because pop culture gets it wrong. The wooden horse is not in this book, and neither is the arrow to the heel that kills Achilles. The Iliad ends before both. It closes not with a victory, but with a funeral. What Homer chose to give us is the smaller, harder story. A few weeks inside the mind of a furious man. Here is the whole poem in one sentence. The greatest warrior of the Greek army, publicly humiliated by his own commander, quits the war in a rage, prays for his own side to be slaughtered so they will come crawling back to him, and clings to that grievance so long that it kills the person he loves most. And only a shared grief at the very end finally teaches him to let go. That is it. Not the plot of the war, but the arc of one temper. Wound, retaliation, refusal, catastrophe, and release. Everything memorable in the Iliad hangs off that spine. Achilles is not a cartoon villain. He has a real grievance. He was genuinely wronged, in front of everyone, by a lesser man who happened to outrank him. That is what makes the poem so uncomfortably close to home. Most of us have been Achilles, cheated of credit, disrespected, certain we are in the right. And most of us know the terrible sweetness of nursing that certainty instead of setting it down. Homer's question is not whether Achilles was wronged. He was. The question is what the wrong entitles him to do and who ends up paying for it. We will walk it in 5 beats. The wound to the ego, praying for your own side to lose, the man who cannot be moved, the friend who pays the bill, and rage turning at last into grief and mercy. First, the wound to the ego. The poem opens not on a battlefield, but in a bureaucratic dispute. A plague is scything through the Greek camp, sent by a god because the supreme commander, Agamemnon, has refused to return a captured girl to her priest father. Forced at last to give her back, Agamemnon salvages his pride the pettiest way he can. He simply takes Achilles' own war prize, a woman named Briseis, as compensation. To us, the detail is ugly. These are human beings treated as trophies, and Homer does not hide that. But inside the story's logic, Briseis is Achilles' public honor made visible, the tangible proof that he is the best. And his commander strips it from him in front of the whole army purely to save face. Achilles is incandescent. He rounds on Agamemnon and says the quiet part out loud, telling his own king to his face, "You devour your people, for you are king over a feeble folk. Otherwise, son of Atreus, henceforward you would insult no man." Then he does the thing the whole poem turns on. He withdraws. He pulls himself and all his soldiers out of the war and retreats to his ships to sulk. Now hold this against your own life. This is the star employee whose big win gets claimed by the boss, who is humiliated in the meeting, and who responds not by quitting outright, but by quietly checking out, doing the bare minimum, letting the team sink, punishing the manager by withholding the one thing he is best at. We have a name for it now: the quiet resignation of the wounded. And the takeaway Homer sets up here is merciless. A wound to your pride, dressed up as a matter of principle, is still just a wound. And when you use your own withdrawal as a weapon, the first people it cuts are almost never the person you meant to punish. Second, and this is the part that should stop you cold, Achilles prays for his own army to lose. He goes down to the grey edge of the sea and calls up his mother, the sea goddess Thetis, and begs her to go to Zeus, the king of the gods, and tip the war against the Greeks, to let his own comrades be driven back and butchered on the plain, so that Agamemnon will feel the full weight of losing him, and the whole army will come to understand that without Achilles they are nothing. Sit with that. He is not praying to win. He is praying for his own side to be slaughtered, so that his indispensability will be proven in blood. And Zeus grants it. The Greeks begin to die in droves, pushed back to their own ships, and Achilles watches from the sidelines with grim satisfaction as the disaster he asked for unfolds. This is the darkest engine of resentment, and you have felt at least the flicker of it. It is the sidelined colleague, quietly hoping the project fails without them. It is the ex who wants the other person's next relationship to crash. It is the part of us that would rather be proven right than see things go well, that treats the failure of our own team as the receipt that vindicates us. Homer names the trap precisely. The moment being right becomes more important to you than things turning out well. You have started rooting for your own people to lose. And a wish like that has a way of being granted and of costing far more than the apology you were holding out for. Third, the man who cannot be moved. With his soldiers dying and the Trojans setting fire to the Greek ships, Agamemnon finally breaks. He swallows his pride and sends an embassy to Achilles at night, his most persuasive men carrying an extraordinary apology. They offer to return Briseis untouched, plus a staggering fortune: gold, bronze, horses, 7 cities, one of Agamemnon's own daughters in marriage. By any reasonable measure, Achilles has won. The most powerful man in the army has publicly, lavishly humbled himself. And Achilles says no. Not only no, he pours contempt on the whole offer, declaring that he trusts nothing Agamemnon says, that words and deeds are 2 different things. Butler gives him a line that lands like a slammed door. Him do I hate, even as the gates of hell, who says one thing while he hides another in his heart. Therefore, I will say what I mean. Everything in that answer is technically justified and completely self-destroying, because by now, the grievance is no longer a thing that happened to Achilles. It has become part of who he is. He is so used to the shape of his own anger that he can no longer fit any apology inside it. And this is the most human turn in the poem. Think of the time someone finally gave you the apology you swore you were waiting for, and you found, to your own surprise, that you did not want to take it because letting go of the anger would have meant letting go of a piece of yourself. Resentment reaches a point where holding it costs more than the original insult ever did. Turning down the olive branch again and again is a choice, and Homer is about to show us that it is a choice people die from. Fourth, the friend pays the bill. The Greek line collapses. The Trojans reach the ships and begin to burn them, and still Achilles will not fight. But his dearest companion, Patroclus, the one person he loves without complication, cannot bear to watch their friends die. He comes to Achilles in tears and begs, "If you will not go out, at least lend me your armor, and let me lead your soldiers, so the Trojans think you have returned and fall back." Achilles, still too proud to fight himself, agrees to this half measure. He lets Patroclus put on his own famous armor and go out in his place. And Patroclus is killed, cut down on the field by Hector, the greatest of the Trojan warriors, wearing the armor of the man who would not come. Achilles' refusal to bend, his insistence on his grievance, does not land on Agamemnon, the man he was angry at. It lands on the person he loved most in the world. This is the cruel arithmetic of every grudge held too long. The stand you take on principle, the hill you will not come down from, is very rarely paid for by the person who wronged you. The bill lands on someone standing near you, a friend, a partner, a child, a colleague, who absorbs the consequence of a fight that was never theirs. You almost never settle your own resentment account yourself. It gets settled, in full, by whoever happens to be closest to you when it finally comes due. And when Achilles sees his friend's body, the anger he aimed at his own commander turns, all at once, into something far more terrible. Fifth, rage turns to grief, and then to mercy. Patroclus dead, Achilles is transformed into pure destroying fury, but the target has changed. He storms back into the war, not for Agamemnon now, but for revenge, and he kills Hector beneath the walls of Troy. It is not enough. Consumed by a grief he cannot discharge, he abuses Hector's corpse for days, dragging it behind his chariot in the dust. trying to make the world hurt as much as he does. And then comes the scene that makes the Iliad immortal. In the dead of night, Hector's father, Priam, the aged king of Troy, slips alone and unarmed into the enemy camp, into the very tent of the man who slaughtered his son. He kneels. He takes Achilles' hands, the hands still stained with his boy's blood, and he kisses them and begs for the body back so he can bury it. And something in Achilles finally breaks open. He does not see an enemy. He sees an old man wrecked by loss, and he thinks of his own father, who will soon grieve for him. And the two of them, killer and bereaved, weep together in the dark. Achilles gives the body back. His rage is not defeated by victory. It is dissolved by a grief shared with the person he had most reason to hate. This is the poem's astonishing answer to anger. Not winning, not revenge, which changed nothing. The cure is the moment he recognizes the enemy's sorrow as identical to his own. Mercy was available the entire time. The step back was always there to take. We just tend to reach for it only after we have lost so much that nothing else is left. So what does all of it add up to? On its surface, the Iliad is a war story, full of jewels and gods and glittering bronze. Underneath, it is the most unflinching study we have of a single emotion, the anger of one proud man, followed all the way from the first insult to the last terrible bill. Homer refuses to make it simple. Achilles is not wrong to feel wronged. Agamemnon really did humiliate him. The tragedy is not that Achilles had no grievance. It is that he could not stop feeding it, could not choose the smaller, harder thing of letting it go, until the cost had already been paid by everyone but the man he blamed. And around this human story, the poem sets a vast, cooling perspective. When one warrior asks another his lineage on the battlefield, the answer is one of the most beautiful passages in all of literature, a reminder of how small and brief every one of these furious lives really is. Butler translates it, "Men come and go as leaves year by year upon the trees. Those of autumn the wind sheds upon the ground, but when spring returns, the forest buds forth with fresh vines. Even so is it with the generations of mankind. The new spring up as the old are passing away." That is the frame Homer puts around Achilles' rage. We are leaves. We get one short season. And here is a man who spent a precious stretch of his one season nursing a grievance until it killed his best friend, and who only understood, far too late, that the anger was never worth a single day of what it took from him. Here is the one thing to carry out of this poem and into your week. Somewhere in your life right now, there is probably a version of Achilles' tent, a grievance you have withdrawn into, a stand you are taking on principle, an apology you are holding out for or refusing to accept. And you may well be right. That is the hard part. You may be genuinely, provably in the right. The Iliad does not ask you to pretend you are not wronged. It asks a colder question. What is the grievance costing, and who is actually paying? Look past the person you are angry at to the people standing near you, the ones who are quietly absorbing the fallout of a fight that was never theirs, because that is where the bill lands. Achilles got his revenge and it healed nothing. He got his apology and it was too late to matter. The one move that could have saved everything, coming down off the hill, taking the offered hand, being the first to step back, was available on every single page. It always is. It just never feels like strength in the moment. It feels like losing. So this week, when you notice yourself nursing the sweet certainty that you are right, Ask what it is quietly costing the people you love, and whether being right is worth more to you than things turning out well. Homer watched a hero choose wrong for most of a poem, and he grieved for him. You still have time to choose the other way, while it is early, while the bill is small, while the person you would have to forgive is still close enough to reach. For all its bronze and blood, the Iliad makes one quiet, durable case: that the deadliest thing on any field is not the enemy across from you, but the grievance you will not put down, and that mercy, the willingness to take the first step back, is available long before you finally reach for it, usually after it has already cost you everything. Achilles wanted to be proven right more than he wanted his own people to be safe, and the poem follows that choice, unblinking, to its ruin, and then to its one moment of grace when a grieving father's hands teach him what victory never could. If this walk through the Iliad gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time we leave the plains of Troy and travel east to 16th century China and one of the most beloved adventures ever written, Journey to the West, the tale of a rebellious monkey, a long road, and a mind that has to be tamed before it can be free. And tell me in the comments, where in your own life are you still sitting in Achilles' tent, right and wronged and paying for it? And what would it cost you to step out of it today?